All right, it's the end of the week here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We made it to Friday, and we are ready to rock and roll into the weekend, starting right here with the Morning Pitt. You know the deal. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's where you can find all of our Pitt video content, whether it's these Morning Pitt videos Monday through Friday, every day of the week, every weekday at least. We get started with the Morning Pitt. We have our live Panther-Lair show like we did on Wednesday night. Every Wednesday night we do that, 8:30 p.m. And we post practice highlights and post-practice interviews and press conferences, all kinds of videos for a Pitt fan to consume right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and then, of course, head over to the main site, the mothership, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, Panther-Lair.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting, all on Panther-Lair.com, and, of course, message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans all day, every day, everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. Pitt fans are talking about it on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. And it's Friday, so what we've been doing is the mailbag edition of the Morning Pitt, where we take questions on our premium message boards at Panther-Lair.com, the Between Fifth and Forbes message board. We ask for those questions usually around Wednesday or so. We start soliciting questions, and people post their questions in a message board thread, and then we answer as many of them as we can right here on the Morning Pitt on Friday. It's kind of a fun way to end the week. I enjoy doing it, and I appreciate everybody who participates. But before we get to the questions, a little bit of news. John Hughley announced he's going to Oklahoma. Transfer destination for the former Pitt center, a guy who was really, a year ago at this time and even later into the calendar year of 2022, viewed as the centerpiece of Pitt's 2022-23 basketball team, and ended up, of course, all the saga, left the team midseason, ended up going into the transfer portal. Now he's going to Oklahoma. So we don't really see him, and that's unfortunate. I think he visited, or he was going to visit, or something, Georgia Tech. West Virginia was on that list as well. I was really kind of holding out hope that he might end up in the ACC. Just call me crazy. I think it would have been interesting to see how that would have went. Certainly, if he were to play a game at the Peterson Event Center, I'm pretty sure the Oakland Zoo would be fairly relentless in its heckling. You heard what they did to Judah Mintz. And I think it would probably dwarf that by a magnitude of about 10 or so, if not more. The way the zoo would, I don't want to say attack because it's just chants and words, but the zoo would try to make it as uncomfortable for John Hughley as possible if he were to come back to the Peterson Event Center. I don't know that really was a factor in him choosing to leave the ACC, but it certainly would have been a factor if he had chosen the ACC and ended up playing a road game at the Peterson Event Center. It certainly would have been rowdy. Let me say that. And I'll be honest, the matchup of John Hughley versus Pitt would have been fascinating to me. John Hughley, who in his last game at Pitt worked off the bench behind Federico, would have gotten a chance to go head-to-head and ostensibly prove that he was the better option at center, and that the coaches should have kept him in the starting lineup as opposed to going with Federico on that particular moment or that particular game. He would have had a chance to prove it. Look, I beat him in a head-to-head matchup. I don't know who I would take in that matchup. I guess I would take Hughley, but it's unfortunate we won't get to see that matchup unless Pitt and Oklahoma were to meet, I guess in the NCAA tournament or something like that. But that news came out yesterday. I figured we should start with it before we jump into the mailbag. But John Hughley is off the market. I haven't seen anything really with Nate Santos. If he's picked anywhere, I don't think he's picked anywhere yet, but we'll keep an eye on that and kind of see what develops. But now let's go to the mailbag. Let's take your questions and see what people were talking about. A number of questions about kind of along these lines. So PGH Sun J 1325 says, Pat Narduzzi said they have 3 scholarships remaining, and that was prior to Miles Alston's departure. If you had to guess as it stands now, how would you spend those 4 scholarships? Hail to Pitt 07 had something similar. He said, who are the potential targets out there for both the Pitt staff and the Pitt NIL bagmen? It's clear we need at least 1 player and probably 2. I think the receiver position will mean the difference between 7 and 5. and 9-3. Yeah, so if you break down the scholarship board, it sort of looks right now, based on Pat Narduzzi's comments and what we kind of have pieced together ourselves, it looks like they've got 4 open scholarship spots to give. My guess is, I mean, you just play the odds. There's a pretty decent chance that number will grow by at least 1 or 2 over the next few weeks. With post-spring transfer decisions, I can't even sit here and tell you who I think will leave. Just that it would be surprising if no one else goes. I mean, it would seem sort of... It would run contrary to everything we all think we know about college sports in 2023 if nobody else leaves this roster via the transfer portal post-spring. You've still got a couple weeks of school left, although kids can be going on visits and things like that. It seems unlikely that they'll be able to hold on to everybody that they've got right now. You would think somebody else is going to transfer, but let's just take 4 as a starting number. I mean, that's where they're at right now, according to Pat Narduzzi. So what would you do with those 4 spots? And it's a little bit tricky for me to sit here and say, well, here are the guys I would target. I don't have the comprehensive list of, wide receivers in the transfer portal in front of me. And even if I did, it would be tough to navigate that. I think you probably have the coaching staff contacting a lot of guys, touching base with a lot of guys, sending a DM. I literally saw a direct message that a former Pitt coach, no longer on the staff, sent to, I forget if it was a recruit or a transfer, but the kid sent me I was like, hey, what have you heard from the Pitt coaches? You've been talking to those guys. And they sent me a DM exchange with this coach. And the first message... this was how the kid answered me. He was just sending me a screenshot of this DM exchange just to this is what I'm hearing. My question was, what are you hearing from the Pitt staff? His answer, well, this is what I'm hearing. And the first direct message, the initiation of the conversation was from the Pitt coach, again, no longer on the staff. And all the message said was Pitt with an exclamation point. And that was how the conversation started. Now, there were further direct messages after that. But that was the initiation of the conversation. And for that recruit or that transfer, that constitutes contact. I always keep that in mind when we see these things about, school X has reached out to player A or player B has heard from school. And I always sort of chuckle to myself, and I'll see Pitt on the list and or any school. And I just sort of imagine let's say Minnesota, right? Minnesota has reached out to so-and-so. Well, that might just mean that one of their assistant coaches sent a direct message on Twitter that said, Minnesota! And that's contact. You get a long list of schools that have contacted transfer player Y, even if all that contact amounts to somebody sending a direct message that says, Iowa! But that's what constitutes contact. So I imagine that there are a lot of transfers out there who've gotten direct messages like that. Just something to start the conversation, something to initiate the contact, just to sort of feel each other out. But I don't have a list of all those guys they've contacted. Back to the original question here. What would you do with 4 open scholarship spots at this point? I think, wide receiver, I mean, I've been banging that drum for a while. I mean, wide receiver has to be a priority target position in the transfer portal for at least 1 and probably 2 if you can get them. I would try to get 2, and maybe it'll be tough to pull off. Maybe you'll only get 1. If you can get a good one, that might be enough. If you get 1 good transfer wide receiver to come in, somebody who's had experience, who's a little bit older, who can impact, make an impact for you and be a playmaker, and you put him with Konate Mumpfield and Bub Means and Dejon Reynolds and then some of the other, some of the younger players that they have, all right, you've got a decent receiving core now. It's not great, but it's decent. It's good. It should be good enough. If you get 2 guys like that, then you're gonna, you should be in even stronger position, of course. So I would do that. I mean, that has to be the first priority. Tyquan Underwood has to have his work cut out for him. I would look into trying to find a linebacker, and this is tricky, and we've talked about this on the basketball side of guys looking and saying, well, where am I going to get my minutes? And I think if you're a linebacker and you look at Pitt right now, you see four guys at the top of a group that plays three all the time. You see four guys in Shane Simon and Bengali Kamara and Solomon DeShields and Brandon George. Now, it's tough to go recruit on the promise of an injury and say, look, you come in, you compete for a job, and if there's an injury, you'll be our first guy up. That's not exactly a convincing sales pitch. What they need is another guy like Tyler Wiltz. And that's not easy to find. But you need to find a Tyler Wiltz guy who's been at, the FCS level and the D2 level and so on and so forth, working down the chain. And a guy who really, really is willing to come in and accept a bench role or reserve role. Now, Tyler Wiltz, by the end of the season, was not in a reserve role, and he played a lot even when he was. But you need someone who's going to be willing to come in and accept a bench role because they want to play in the ACC for their final year. I mean, that's what you need. That's what you would like to have. I think there's good young talent on this roster. I think Braylon Lovelace looks good as a true freshman. I've heard some good things about Kyle Lewis. Obviously, you know what we think about Jordan Bass coming in. I like Rasheem Biles, too. I think there's some good young talent on this roster, but getting another experienced guy, getting a Tyler Wiltz type of player to go along with Simon, DeShields, Kamara, George, and at least get you to 5. If you could at least get to sort of 5 veteran experienced players, which is what they would have in that scenario, I think you feel a little bit better about it. You feel a little bit better than being as close as they are right now to having a true freshman or a walk-on step into a primary role. I'm not opposed to seeing Jordan Bass get on the field this year. I'm not opposed to seeing Braylon Lovelace get on the field this year, or Kyle Lewis get on the field this year, or Nick Lappy get on the field this year. You'd like to create a little bit of insulation, though, between what you have and when you get to those guys. You'd like to split that up just a little bit more, more than it currently is. And so I would look for that. I think those are probably the two positions that and not necessarily that those two are on equal footing, but those are probably the two positions you would look at and say probably could beef up a little bit here. And bring in some help and create a little more support in this position group or that position group. Those are so if I'm looking at 4 scholarship spots, probably best case scenario, sort of realistic best case scenario, you get a veteran, experienced, productive wide receiver. You get an athletic, productive wide receiver from a lower division or linebacker from a lower level. And then you have maybe 2 scholarships to give to, I keep seeing this that Pat Narduzzi says something about another recruit in the 2023 class. Maybe that's an option. Or walk-ons. You reward a couple of walk-ons, a Jake McConaughey or Nick Lappy, like I mentioned. You've got 2 punters battling for the starting punting job, and neither one of those guys is on scholarship, and Caleb Junko and Jeff Yerk. So, I think there's a bunch of options for what you could do with those other scholarships. In addition to bringing in the transfers that you need to help you put a team on the field this year. So that's probably what I would do, but we'll see how the staff approaches it. H2P Vaughn says, do you think Braylon Lovelace ends up on the 2 deep for the opener? That's going to depend probably on what I just talked about, on whether they go get a transfer to come in. You're going to have Simon and George at middle linebacker. You're going to have Kamara and DeShields at the 2 outside linebacker spots. So you're going to need, to fill out your 2 deep, you're going to need 2 outside linebackers. I wouldn't be surprised if, I think if he gets healthy, I think Kyle Lewis can be a really good player. Maybe good enough to even put himself on the depth chart. But that still leaves another spot that is probably going to be filled either by Aiden Henningham, if he ever gets healthy and contributes, or a walk-on, or a true freshman. And if it's a true freshman, Braylon Lovelace has the upper hand, having enrolled early and being here for all of spring camp and impressing the coaches during spring camp. But Jordan Bass is coming in as the man. This is a guy who's expected to be really good early in his career. He was really good in high school in Virginia, and I think he's expected to be really good at Pitt. So I kind of think either a walk-on or a true freshman is going to end up on the 2 deep this year, unless Aiden Henningham makes a giant leap forward. I do believe in Kyle Lewis. I think he's got a chance, even though he hasn't played either. He's basically a freshman too. But Otherwise, yeah, I could see Lovelace having a shot. I would guess no. I would guess they end up with some of those upperclassmen on there, but he's going to have a shot because, again, unless they bring in a couple transfers or even just one, if they bring in one transfer outside linebacker, that will probably bump the true freshmen and all of them off of off the two deep or out of reach of the two deep. That doesn't mean they won't play, but it'll probably bump them out of reach for the two deep. But if they don't bring in a transfer, I could see a freshman being on there, and it very well could be Lovelace. Panther Hog 1 asks, how was the festival? So last weekend, you saw it. I was on location for Monday's Morning Pitt. Went to I was gifted a couple tickets to a music festival in Charleston, South Carolina last weekend. So I had to miss the spring game, so I rewatched it Sunday morning before the shows. The music started on Sunday, so I was able to catch up on everything and then talk about it on the Morning Pit. The festival was great. I haven't been to a music festival in years. It was a lot of fun. The weather was beautiful. It was a great venue, great location. The High Water Music Fest, if you have a chance to go to it in the future, I highly recommend it. If you're into that kind of music, I certainly was. I had a blast, and maybe we want to do stuff like that again. Rhino527 says, is there a lack of speed and athleticism on offense, or was I being overly critical watching the spring game? That's a good question. I think, I've said a bunch of times that I think Bub Means has a lot of athleticism and speed and that kind of thing. He's just got to refine the details and points of being a wide receiver. I am still looking for the running backs to produce or have or feature a home run hitter like they had in Izzy Abanikanda last year. They might not have another Izzy Abanikanda, but to get somebody who can break that long run, I just don't think that's Rodney Hammond. I don't think that's his game. He might get a long one every now and then, but I just don't think it's his game to break that long one like Abanikanda did. I'm guessing Sibo Flemister's probably the most likely option to be that kind of runner. I don't know. Derek Davis, I'm curious to see. I don't know if he has quite the breakaway speed, but I need to see more of it. I haven't really watched Derek Davis. I haven't watched Derek Davis run further than like 10 yards or 20 yards since he was at Gateway. So we need to see a little bit more. He certainly didn't do any of it at LSU and had a couple nice plays. He had a nice play on the touchdown in the spring game on Saturday. So I'll give him credit for that. But I still haven't. I don't know that he has that breakaway speed. There's Che Wabuko. He shows up on the screen. He definitely has the speed, but is he a football player or a track star? I think that's a question that still remains to be answered. So to your question, do they have? How did you put it, Rhino? He said, "Is there a lack of speed and athleticism on offense?" I'll say this. Aside from Izzy Abanikanda, I don't think. I don't think there's a huge drop-off in speed and athleticism at receiver from what they had last year. Jared Wayne was a really good player. Was he the fastest guy on the field or most athletic? Not necessarily. He had a great senior season. He had a great final 2 or 3 games of his senior season. But he wasn't necessarily the fastest or most athletic guy. I think Bub Means is probably faster and more athletic. So I don't think there's a huge drop-off at speed and athleticism at receiver. At running back is where you do have a drop-off. Tight ends are basically the same group. You should have more athleticism at quarterback. I would say that. I think Phil Dracovic is more athletic, probably a little faster than Keaton Slovis. And I think he'll show that this season. That'll be one of his. That'll be part of his arsenal. You know what I mean? That'll be among his weapons this coming season. So I don't think there's a huge drop off from last year, aside from Abanikanda being gone, and that is a pretty considerable drop off. So yeah, I think I'm with you. I look at this and I don't see a lot of explosiveness among the playmakers, among the skill guys, aside from potentially Bub Means. So I don't know if you were being overly critical. I think the spring game can be hard to see some of those things. It feels like, even though coaches do everything they can to set it up as a real game, it feels like guys still go at, if not half speed, then 3/4 speed or something like that a little bit. But I'm kind of with you. I have sort of the same impression, and these guys, we'll see if they can prove us wrong. Let's see. Fort Pitt Panther says, we all get excited when a barrage of commitments happens like it did for Pitt in March, myself included. But the truth is that this class is on pace to finish in pretty similar territory to where most of other classes have finished. Without being able to predict where recruits will end up in the final rankings, who do you see Pitt having a realistic shot to help join Farmer and Winnington and really elevating the class? And so I guess you're talking about like 4-star guys, highly rated guys. You want to find those guys who are going to you're looking for the guys who are going to improve the class ranking. And I think you mentioned Sincere Edwards, defensive end, who took an unofficial visit here earlier this month, and he's coming back for an official visit in June. He was a 4-star guy who visited this spring. Just kind of going down the list, Justine Willis, a running back, was a 4-star prospect who visited this spring. Aaron Scott, a corner who visited this spring, is a 4-star guy. Cameron Lindsay, like you mentioned, the linebacker from Aliquippa, is a 4-star guy. He was here this spring. Brian Robinson, 4-star outside linebacker, defensive end from Ohio, was here like a bunch of times this spring. I don't think Pitt's going to get him, but he was around all the time. I tell you, Gabriel Williams, a 4-star linebacker, he visited this spring. Kid from Maryland, was really impressed with Pitt, really liked what he saw. And I think they put themselves in a real position to have a shot at landing him. They need to get him back for an official visit. But to your question, yeah, I think Sincere Edwards they have a really good chance with. I think Cameron Lindsay is going to be a guy to watch for a while. Gabriel Williams, like I mentioned, I think who was the other guy I was just looking at? I'm kind of scrolling through my list here. Aaron Scott, the corner, I think is one to sort of keep an eye on. As somebody that they could be in good shape for. So I mean, the players are out there. I don't think they're really going to end up with a flashy class. And it's probably just not going to happen very often that they do end up with a flashy class. And I think there's probably a lot of reasons for that, but it's just seems to be the way they recruit. And the guys that go after and the guys they're able to land. There was another class in here, or another question in here. The Pitt boy asked, do you think the class of 2025 can be the year Pitt starts to re-find success in the WPIAL? And if not, how many more top 25 type seasons will it take before they can regain a foothold of some sort? I don't know what the solution is in the WPIAL. I really don't. I mean, we've talked about this a lot of times. We've talked about the struggles in recruiting the WPIAL. We've talked about this or that with the WPIAL, that they're too close to it or they see Pitt too much. I don't know what Pitt would need to do. I mean, stack 11-win seasons, I guess, beyond the 11-win season they had 2 years ago. Win national championships, I guess, make the college football playoff and sell out 65,000 people every game. I don't know. I don't know what the solution is. For whatever reason, Pitt resonates and Pitt's coaches resonate better with players outside the area. And I think they'll get guys every now and then. I think there'll be 4-star guys locally that they do get. I don't think they'll miss on all of them all the time. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that they got Nakai Johnson and Elliott Donald in the same class the year after they got Deion Hayes. So they can get guys sometimes, but they're not going to get them all. They've never gotten them all. Even going back to Dave Wanstead's days, he didn't get them all. I don't know if you're ever really going to get to a point where you're getting where you're the dominant force in Western Pennsylvania. I don't know what it would take to get there. I kind of feel like that bridge has been crossed. Pitt is what it is, and it's viewed as it is in Western Pennsylvania, and it's hard to undo that. So I'm not sure what it'll take. I think the staff just has to keep building the roster and the recruiting classes from outside the area. All right, last one. Jay Lazinger says, do you get the sense there's any animosity in the quarterback room from the younger players when we keep bringing in grad transfers? I think no, given Yarnell stayed, but I'm interested to hear your take. I think it's always going to be tough. They can all talk a good game. It's all business and competition and this and that. But I think it's tough when coaches bring in a transfer at your position, somebody presumably to play ahead of you. I think that's got to be hard. I mean, these guys are human. No matter how much they want to try and be robots, no matter how much they want to try and talk about it's just business, they're human. I think some of the keys you can have to help avoid that is the relationships. That if you've got a strong relationship between the head coach and the player, between the coordinator and the player, between the position coach and the player, and that player feels like he can talk to the coach, if the coach is open and honest with the player, I think there can be a level of respect there that helps keep things even keeled. But it's hard to say that you wouldn't be disappointed. Nick Patty was probably, if you had interviewed him last year during the fall, he was probably all business about it. But as his comments to us when we talked, last December or January or whenever, I guess it was January after the Sun Bowl when we talked for an episode of the Morning Pitt conversation with Nick Patty. I mean, it's clear that he wasn't okay with it. He would have said the right things publicly, but he wasn't okay with it. And I imagine that's how a lot of these guys react. I mean, again, they're human, and they're not just human. They're like 18, 19, 20-year-olds. So, yeah, they're probably going to be mad about it. They're going to be disappointed. But again, I think it comes back to those relationships. You need to have strong relationships between the players and the coaches. And if you do, you should be able to get through some of those situations where things get a little sticky, if you know what I mean. All right, that's all the questions. Thanks everybody who contributed though and participated. These mailbag episodes of the Morning Pit are always fun to do. I like having the questions like, what are you guys thinking about? And then we can answer it here. So I appreciate everybody who participated. We'll do it again next week. We'll do it every Friday through the summer and maybe even into the fall. I don't know. We'll see how the fall content schedule comes together for the Morning Pit. But thanks to everybody, though, for submitting the questions. And thanks for watching the Morning Pit this week. It's been a fun week, as they all seem to be. We always have something to talk about. So I appreciate you watching these videos. And I hope you've had a great week so far, not just on the Morning Pit videos, but overall. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and head over to Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com for all of the Pitt sports news. Thanks again for watching the videos. Hope you've had a great week, and I hope you have a great Friday and a great weekend, and we will talk to you again on Monday morning for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.